Hello, hello, hello. Welcome all. I am so excited to be here with you today to dig into these rich concepts. We are going to be exploring universal design for learning, inclusive practice, and the connection to providing all of the individuals we serve, our young learners and scholars, with equitable access. Now, first and foremost, let me introduce myself. My name is Mirko Chardin, and I am currently serving in the capacity of being the Chief Equity and Inclusion Officer at Novak Education. Prior to being in this role, I spent about 20 years in the field as a school leader in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, the last 10 years or so being the founding head of school of the Putnam Avenue Upper School in Cambridge, Mass. I am also the co-author of the best-selling Equity by Design and an active practicing hip hop artist. And I love sharing that last piece with educators as a reminder that the person that you are in your personal life is exactly who you are in your professional life. When we don those professional personas, sometimes we lose sight of the fact that the other human beings who engage with us regularly, our colleagues and our kiddos, they see the full magnitude of who we are, not just the small slice. So it's imperative that we normalize developing that metacognitive ability to see ourselves as we actually are, so that we are not unintentionally manifesting as a barrier or a limiting agent that gets in the way of the individuals that we're here for, our scholars and our young learners, to have a powerful experience. Now, as we begin our journey, I want to share with you some norms, some expectations that I have for all of you, and they might be familiar with you because they're not actually authored by me. They come to us directly from Glenn Singleton's Courageous Conversations About Race, and they are the first and foremost, stay engaged. This time is going to go by quickly. I know that there's temptation to check email, check social media, check news apps and other things, but I promise you, if we hold this time sacred, we're going to have a transformative, powerful experience. And I know this to be true because I'm asking all of you, it's our second norm, that you will speak your truth with no shame, blame, or judgment via the chat box. I'm not a sage on the stage. It's not just going to be about me. Some of the most powerful learning that takes place today is going to be as a result of you sharing boldly and broadly and making connections with colleagues as they share as well. And now, since I'm asking you to speak your truth, it is normal and natural to sometimes experience some discomfort. What that means is not that anyone is harming you or doing anything negative, but you might see some perspectives, some ideas that you weren't expecting to hear, and that might move you out of your comfort zone, which simply means that you're making rich new connections and learning in a real robust way. And I certainly, through the content I share, will be addressing, race, class, bias, things that sometimes are perceived as taboo elements within our society. So it's also normal and natural to experience some discomfort when those things come up. I'll even go as far as saying if you experience no discomfort whatsoever, it's probably because we're not doing an authentic job of speaking our truths. And certainly, last but not least, I need each and every single one of you to expect and accept non-closure. What I mean by this is you will leave this journey with more questions than answers. It's not a bad thing. This work is truly about conceptualizing it as a marathon, not a sprint. It's not just about checking boxes or crossing something off a list. It's about the journey and how we transform lives as a result of it. So if you leave with more questions than answers, that's fabulous. It's communicating to me that these concepts have really resonated and there's a commitment to continue to think about them and to truly have them bleed in to your work as we move forward. Now, the first thing I have for us as we prepare to begin this journey is a micro moment of reflection. Reflection is one of the most important elements of the learning process. Your ability to reflect individually, with colleagues, and certainly with your kiddos. And in this quick micro moment, we're only going to be here for 120 seconds. I want you to reflect on your why. Why have you made a commitment to be an educator? What is driving you to continue to remain in this profession? I'm asking this question because across our nation, there are educators that have not only left their classrooms, their school communities, school districts. They've walked away from the profession. But my assumption is that those of us who have stayed are staying for a reason. We are grounded in certain beliefs, experiences, desires that we believe that we can make a change that will have positive impact in the life of another human being. And I want you to just take a quick moment, 120 seconds, to reflect on that, because our work is transformed dynamically when we are grounded in our whys before we get to our whats. So I'm gonna play a little bit of a song. It's gonna be Don't Stop Believing by Journey as a reminder to continue to believe in yourself, your colleagues, and your kiddos. And while we hear this song, I want you to light up that chat box with your why. Now, you can also share on social media if you're the type of person that does your best thinking by sharing it out in the universe. Not here to micromanage how you reflect. As long as you do, I look forward to seeing some info about your whys. Here comes Journey's Don't Stop Believing.
Just a small town girl living in a lonely world. She took the midnight train going anywhere. Just a city boy, born and raised in South Detroit. He took the midnight train going anywhere. A singer in a smoky room, the smell of wine and cheap perfume. For a smile they can share the night. It goes on and on and on and on. Strangers waiting up and down the boulevard. Their shadows searching in the night. Streetlights, people living just to find emotion, hiding somewhere in the night.
Love what I am seeing in the chat box. You all are being bold and brave and speaking your truths with no shame, blame, or judgment. And that is incredible. We're going to have such a good time during the session today. And now I'm going to share a little bit with you about my why. My why is kind of grounded in what we see on the screen right now. The notion that access alone, it's not equity. And access alone is not enough to create circumstances that will transform the lives of the young people who are dependent upon us. See, I start here because in our nation, access, the notion that access has kind of become a buzzword. And there's so many that are hanging their hats on this idea that all we have to do to make magic happen within our schoolhouses and classrooms are to find the right resources. And now I agree with that. It's true that there is power in having the right resources, but our work is not in engaging with inanimate objects. We actually engage with other human beings. And if we are truly committed to meeting the needs of those that we're here to serve, because as educators, we don't talk about this a lot, but we're actually in a service industry. You know, our job is to provide a service. We deliver a service in the form of an educational experience that is transformative, that we hope is not a waste of time. And we deliver this service to our customers and clients, to our kiddos, to our young learners and scholars who are are dependent upon us. See, school is not about adults. School is about kids. As adults, we've already completed our journeys through K-12 education, and of our own free will and volition, we have taken positions in school buildings and as part of districts, so we can hopefully deliver a service that will be transformative for the individuals who are dependent upon us, which means it's not about us. And if we're going to meet their needs, and particularly if we value equity, we have to go above and beyond access. And as a point of clarification, I want to make sure that you all understand what I'm talking about when I refer to equity. See, when I talk about equity, I'm always referring to the 4 bullets that we see on the screen. Equitable access to inclusive classrooms with grade level peers, equitable opportunities to learn aligned to grade level standards. And the bottom 2, they're not for you, they're from the perspective of your learners. Equitable expectations that your learners can be successful when we provide them with appropriate supports, and equitable feelings of both belonging and hope. See, it's my belief that if we go above and beyond access, if we normalize reflecting in bold and broad ways that don't let ourselves off the hook, we can ensure that we always create circumstances that meet the needs of all of our learners, no matter what condition they come to us in. And next, I'm going to share with you 3 big reflective questions, which comprise what I call the Going Beyond Access framework, because it's my belief if we normalize wrestling with these questions as we sit to design instruction, as we sit to take into consideration events that we're planning, as we sit to review policy, that we will always be able to be sure that we're taking into consideration our learners and creating circumstances that meet their needs. And the first question is, are we valuing impact over intent? Is it a circumstance where we are simply patting ourselves on the back, believing that we are well-intended, good people who are sacrificing time, effort, and energy out of our own lives to pour into others, while not being mindful of how our decisions show up and manifest in the hearts, minds, and lives of those who we serve? Well, I know we live in the midst of a society that talks a lot about intent right now. And it is true. You need to be intentional in the practices that you choose to implement in your practice. But our work's not about intention. It's about impact. It's about the lived experience of those that we're here to serve. School is not about adults. It's about kids. And we have to normalize taking into consideration our audience. It is also both plausible and possible to have the best of intentions, yet unintentionally find ourselves in circumstances in which we inflict harm on other individuals. Case in point, I can jump in a car, jump down the street, be driving on the freeway, have every intention of following all the rules of the road, have every intention of not getting into an accident. I have music turned down. I have laser light focus on what I'm doing, but I blink my eyes. And in the fraction of a second, someone cuts me off. I'm in an accident. It wasn't my intention. I tried to do everything possible to not be in this circumstance, yet unintentionally, I'm finding that the impact that I've had in this circumstance is that I have inflicted harm on another individual. It wasn't my intent, but it's still manifested. See, the work is not about intention. It's always about impact. It's always about how these decisions are affecting our young people. Next question, can all of our learners see themselves reflected in our work? You know, is it a circumstance where we say things like all means all, while implicitly communicating to some of our learners that they're invisible because they never see any evidence of them reflected in practitioners, in the materials that we put before them, or even in images that they see on slideshows when we interact with them virtually? And when I lift this up, I'm not talking about a simple act of kindness, and I am certainly not talking about politics. I am talking about the fact that each and every single one of us as human beings has a small almond-sized gland in the center of our brains known as the amygdala that's responsible for triggering that survival mode, flight, fight, or freeze reaction. And all of us, not just your kiddos, but each and every single one of you as a human being, when we enter into spaces where we see no evidence of ourselves reflected, our amygdalas go into red alert. We enter in prepared for flight, fight, or freeze because we have no evidence and no knowledge that the individuals in this space have a sense of value of us, however we identify. See, representation matters. And again, it's not about politics and it's not about kindness. It's about brain science. And we'll certainly dig into this throughout the course of our journey this afternoon as well. And last but not least, is the work authentically relevant? Not to you. School is not about adults. It's about kids. This question applies to learners that sit in seats before you. Are we communicating that we have done our due diligence to reflect back to our young people in practice, not just through what we say, but in action and deed, that school is something that's being done for our children and with them, opposed to them? And are we doing this by communicating to them that we have an authentic sense of what has significance, importance, and value to them in the world outside of school? And we're connecting it to our content so our young people see that school is not a waste of time, but that it's actually a place in which they receive tools and skill sets that help them navigate this crazy and scary world that we all find ourselves in. See, it's my belief if we normalize using these questions, and what I mean by normalizing is that we refer to them, we consider them each and every time we set the plan, whether it's instruction or whether we're considering policy. They serve as a light post that ensures that we're taking into consideration our learners and doing this work in a way that communicates that it's about them and not simply about satisfying our own egos. Now, in addition to this, we have powerful educational frameworks such as universal design for learning. And universal design for learning allows us to proactively plan in a way that will communicate to all of our learners that we believe in them. And educational framework, as it says on the screen, is a set of principles, beliefs, values that guide our work. It's about lifting up the adaptive components. Our work always manifests as adaptive first and then technical. It's about what we believe, what we value, what we think, how we consider ourselves and our role in the work, how we consider our young people, then the technical aspects of what we do as a result of those beliefs. If we don't normalize reflecting or reflecting through the lenses of that going beyond access framework, it is challenging for us to be situated in understanding what that belief system is that's driving those decisions. And when we don't do this, we sometimes unintentionally make decisions that don't reflect that we authentically value the learners that are sitting before us. Now, when we wrestle with universal design, there are three tenets that I believe are foundational that all UDLers embrace. First and foremost, that variability is the rule, not the exception. Again, this speaks about neuroscience, that 3 decades of neuroscience have communicated to our society that the neural pathways that make up our brains are just as unique as our fingerprints, which means we are always surrounded by difference. Our brains are not wired in the same way. We perceive the world, make meaning of the world, make connections, interpret things differently. We are always surrounded by difference, even if we don't believe that we see evidence of difference before us. Taking this into consideration, we always proactively plan for difference. We always proactively plan for different perspectives. We know that our way is simply a way and not the way. And if we have 80 learners that we're dealing with, that there are perhaps 80 different ways to perceive and make meaning of what's before us. We always take that into consideration when we are doing this work. Second, that all of our learners can work towards the same firm goals and grade level standards. For me, this speaks of how UDL is all about high expectations. Stated differently, for me, this communicates that in the world of UDL, we hold everybody to the same high expectations. We hold everybody to the same targets. We don't change targets for anyone. Why? Because when you change a target, you change a trajectory. And our young people always land exactly where we expect them to. See, where we have these circumstances of saying, this standard, this objective, it's too challenging. They're not going to be able to do it. I'm going to give them something else. You just sent them on a detour. And when at the end of the marking term or unit or semester or year, you find that your young people are not where you expected them to be, it's because you sent them on detours by shifting targets. That's not our job. Our job is identifying what gets in the way and ensuring that our young people are able to satisfy those goals, because final bullet, We believe that each and every single one of our learners, not just the ones that you like, not just the ones that have advocacy at home, but including the ones that might be driving you crazy today, that innately within them, they all have the potential to operate at expert level if we, as their educators, are able to remove the barriers. And what I mean by barriers are the limiting agents, the things that get in the way. See, if we truly wrestle with this and unpack this, it's not just some kumbaya, yay, I believe in all kids. No, no, no. This is saying that if we truly believe that all of our learners innately within them have the potential to release inner genius, then we know our role as educators are not to cast judgment on which kids we think have it versus which kids we think don't, because we acknowledge that they all have that potential within them. And if we don't see that genius manifesting itself, it's not because our kids are broken. It's not because there's something the matter with them. It's because there are barriers in the way. And it's our job to proactively identify what those barriers are and remove them, so our young people's inner genius can reveal itself, including if the big barriers are invisible, because they live in our own unchecked thoughts, thinking, traditions, and practices. That's why we have to normalize reflection. That's why we have to normalize reflecting in a way that communicates that we're going above and beyond access, to ensure that we're not unintentionally creating this sense of privilege that says that we don't authentically and explicitly need to normalize entering into those vulnerable spaces of considering our audience, our young people, and considering how our actions and plans are actually felt by them as they experience them. Now, I'm sure you can see that I am passionate about this work because I believe that this is the work that changes lives, that has changed my life and the lives of countless young people that I have worked with. And, to help us really dig into this, and especially since I'm a little bit of a non-traditional educator, I'm not sure if you picked up on that yet, but I'm very non-traditional. I am not going to continue our entire session by just throwing research and data and theories at you. I'm actually going to spend some time sharing with you a tale, the story of an individual, in hopes that as we examine the ups and downs of their experiences with the educational system, and as we examine the fragility of their humanity, that it will lift up the fact that if we normalize going above and beyond action, and if we normalize planning in universally designed ways, that we will always, no matter what condition a young person comes to us in, we will always be able to create circumstances that not only lead to them having a positive experience, but that positively impact the very trajectory of their lives. And now, the individual I'm going to be sharing with you a little bit about is Mirko. I am going to enter into what I call a moment of authentic vulnerability and fragility to reveal some of the intimate details of my journey. Again, in the hopes that through me entering into this space of vulnerability before you, it will help exemplify that if we normalize this work, we can truly make magic happen. And now, there's a quote that you see on the screen. It's a Sankofa proverb that I always recite before I begin the telling of my tale, because I believe that this quote grounds me in the strength to be able to reveal some intimate details about my journey with individuals that I haven't actually met before. And it simply states, know your story, own your story is your power. Now, I also always begin the telling of my tale by sharing the poem Flag Salute, written by the Harlem Renaissance poet Esther Poppel, because I believe this poem encapsulates the world in which my journey took place. And sadly, as we take into consideration the society that we're currently existing in, I think it'll be easy for you to identify the duality of experience that's represented in this poem. So without further ado, here comes Flag Salute. I pledge allegiance to the flag. They dragged him naked through the muddy streets, a feeble-minded black boy, and the charge, supposed assault upon an aged woman of the United States of America. 1 mile they dragged him like a sack of meal, a rope around his neck, a bloody ear left dangling by the patriotic hand of Nordic youth, a boy of 17, into the republic for which it stands. And then they hanged his body to a tree below the window of that county judge whose pleadings for that battered human flesh was stifled by the brutish, ruckus howls of men and boys and women with their babes, brought out to see the bloody spectacle of murder in the style of 33. 3,000 strong they were, one nation, indivisible. To make the tale complete, they built a fire. What matters that the stuff they burnt was flesh and bone and hair and reeking gasoline. With liberty and justice, they cut the rope in bits and passed them out for souvenirs amongst the men and boys. The teeth, no doubt, on golden chains will hang about the favored necks of sweethearts, wives and daughters, mothers, sisters, babies too, for all. My journey actually begins with the image of the individuals we see on the left-hand side of the screen, who actually happen to be my biological parents. And when I share this image, the first thing that always comes to mind for me is that my folks are looking cute and stylish and just trying to capture the moment in their relationship. But what's not conveyed by this image is the fact that the gentleman who's seated there, my biological dad, he was a prominent Roman Catholic priest in the city of Boston, my come-from place. And for those of you who are not familiar with Roman Catholicism, priests take a vow of celibacy. They're not supposed to have children. They're not supposed to engage in any type of intimate physical contact with other human beings, which means I was always a secret. There was a duality to our relationship. There were certain circumstances in which I could have access to him and have the semblance of a relationship. But more often than not, I had to deny that I knew him. I had to say I had no father, so I could serve as a guardian, a keeper of the secret, me. And as a kid growing up, I actually had a great deal of pride in that. I thought it was incredible that my dad entrusted me with being a guardian, a keeper of such a rich and valuable secret. And this image does not convey the fact that my mom has always wrestled with bipolar schizophrenia, which is meant as the only other human being in the household with her. There were always responsibilities that I had to ensure that bills were paid on time, that there was food in the fridge, that she was taking her meds, that prescriptions were filled, that we were actually making it to medical appointments on time. Things that, again, as a child growing up, I thought was amazing. I thought it was incredible that my mom saw me as this resource that helped hold together our family. And I start here because if we cannot create safe and welcoming spaces, our young people will never reveal to us what's actually going on in their lives outside of school and what's actually occupying the majority of their neocortex. I know this because although I am easily able to share this with you freely now, through my K-12 journey, there was never an educator that I thought was trustworthy enough for me to share anything about my parents with. And now you see a Haitian flag on the screen because I'm a first-generation Haitian American. I'm a proud child of immigrants. My parents came here in the 50s to escape the dictatorship on the island and pursue a better life and the American dream. And growing up, I had so much pride in that flag and the culture I thought it represented. Pride in the music, pride in the food, pride in the cultural heritage, and pride in my extended family. I have 5 uncles, 3 aunts, and I often say way too many cousins to count. But you see, that sense of pride in myself, it shifted for me in the 4th grade. Because in the 4th grade of school, I believe I encountered this message that it was not okay to be me. And I say this not because anything my classmates did. My classmates, they were always cool. But some of my teachers, who I believe were good people, who were extremely well-intended good people, who just weren't always mindful of the impacts of the decisions they made. Some of them, when they'd hear about my ethnic background, they'd say things like, Mirko, are you really Haitian? Because you don't look Haitian and you don't sound Haitian. You don't dress or smell Haitian. Mirko, how could you be Haitian? And while I didn't know what they expected a Haitian to look like, sound like, dress like, or smell like, I think I got a pretty crystal clear message that it was not okay to be Haitian, at least not in public. So I actually began concealing that element of my identity, actually until adulthood. Because I knew if I simply said that I was African-American, that they wouldn't ask these weird questions that were making me feel so uncomfortable. And I also didn't understand how my teachers didn't get that asking these questions was so disrespectful and that it made me feel so awkward in class. I didn't understand this because up until that moment, they always said things like they believe in me, that they're here for me, that I'm the future. So I didn't understand why this space, school, that I always thought was a safe space, was now making me feel really weird. And in the midst of me thinking about this, I had an epiphany. I looked around the classroom, I looked at my teachers, I looked at my friends, and a light bulb went off. I thought to myself, hey, what's going on? Nobody who works here looks like any of us. None of the things on the walls represents any of us or our culture. The stuff we study has nothing to do with where we live or our community. And up until that point, teachers have always said there was no such thing as a bad question. So when I would raise my hand to ask about representation, I was shocked by the intense level of disrespect I was met with, because I was often told to shut up, put my head down, put my hand down, that I was being a behavior problem, that I was bringing up things that nobody was supposed to talk about, and that I was going to get sent to the principal's office. And I just couldn't understand why school, the space that I used to be excited to go to, was now starting to feel like a space that was communicating that I had no place in it. And now I'm going to date myself a little bit by sharing with you all that I grew up in the 1990s. And as a 90s baby, I didn't have Alexa, Siri, Google, social media, or the internet. What that means is when I wrestled with issues that I thought adults could not provide me with support with, the only resource I thought that was at my disposal to give me windows and mirrors into the outside world and to help me make sense of things was network television. And when I turned on network television seeking representation, I was shocked, because I did see images of healthy families and communities, but they didn't look like mine. I saw images of families that always had two parents that were present, that had this incredible, loving partnership like nothing I had ever seen before. Two parents who always honored and acknowledged the gender that they were assigned at birth. Folks who wrestled with issues that I didn't think were issues. Folks who projected a value system that didn't reflect my own. And I started to think to myself, there must be a conspiracy going on. People like me seem like we're invisible in school. And it seems like the people who are creating the societal messages that show up on these TV shows, that they're communicating that people like me are supposed to be invisible too. Now, this is not me saying I didn't see images of brown men on TV in the 90s, because I did, but they typically manifested in the form of 1 to 3 different archetypes. Either that of the star athlete like Michael Jordan, that of the comedian or funny guy like Eddie Murphy or Martin Lawrence, or that of the thug or tough guy like Snoop or Tupac. And while I enjoyed playing basketball, I knew I wasn't on my way to the league. And while I enjoyed making jokes, I knew it wasn't my gift to bring laughter to the world through comedy. But when I saw images of the thug or the tough guy, they resonated. And they resonated because in the community outside of school, the thugs and the tough guys, it seemed like they were the only ones who were authentically safe. What I mean by that is they could come and go as they please, say whatever they wanted. Nobody bothered them. So I started to think to myself, I got it. This is what I'm supposed to model myself after. And what was fascinating is while I was wrestling with this internally, it seemed like some of my educators had a form of mental telepathy or something, because it's then in my life that I started to hear with frequency, Mirko, you need to watch how you dress. Mirko, you need to watch what you listen to. Mirko, you need to pay attention to who you hang out with, because people like you end up dead or in jail. People like you are failures sometimes. People like you become statistics, Mirko. And at that particular point in time, I just couldn't take the disrespect any longer. I felt like I was only in school because I had to be. And in fact, in my heart of hearts, I made a decision when I was 13 years old and in the 8th grade that I was going to drop out as soon as I became a 16-year-old. I knew that school was not for a person like me. And in those days, 16 was the legal age to drop out in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. So I was just buying time in school until I could leave that terrible place. And I also made a commitment in my heart of hearts that I would blow up every class session and every assembly that I was ever in. Not because I wanted to be a bad kid, but because I wanted to make sure that every single kid who was ever in school with me knew that the principal, the assistant principal, the counselors, the teachers, that they were all frauds, phonies, liars, that they were paid to say that they care about us, but they really don't. Watch. Next period in math class, I'm going to ask her how this applies to the world outside of school, and she's going to send me right back to the principal's office. Don't trust her. She's a liar. Or watch. Last period, when we go to that assembly, I'm going to ask the assistant principal about representation. And watch, I'm going to get suspended again. Don't trust them. They don't care about us. This created a circumstance for me where actually by the time I was 13 and in the 8th grade, I had already been expelled from 3 different Boston public schools. But I didn't care, because I knew school was not a place for me. And I was just buying time till I could leave that wretched place. Now, add insult to injury. The community outside of school wasn't always a safe space either. And there's a quick quote on the screen that simply states that people of color accounted for about 75% of those stopped by the Boston police, 63% of them being Black, in a city where less than 25% of the population was Black. And don't worry, some of y'all, I am not going on an anti-law enforcement rant. I certainly could, and I think as a result of some of the things that are happening in our society currently, I'd be justified if I did, but I'm actually somebody who has a great deal of respect for those in the military and law enforcement. I have friends and family members who are in the military and law enforcement, and I respect them. I love what they do. And my former school community, the Putnam Ave Upper School that I led for a decade, after founding it in Cambridge, Mass, we had this powerful, proactive partnership with the Cambridge PD, where we actually had officers enroll their children as students in our school. And those same officers would be before school on the playground playing basketball with kids. And those same officers would be in a school building during the day, serving as tutors and mentors. And they'd even be in the building after school, running after school homework help centers. See, I am aware of the potential of positive, proactive partnerships between those in law enforcement education. Yet, at the same time, I do have to lift up in this micro moment the fact that many of us have experienced trauma at the hands of authority figures in school and in the community as a result of them making assumptions of who we are when they looked at us. And I'm going to share with you a brief anecdote about an experience that I had also while I was 13. This one happens during the summertime. I believe it was the month of July. And I had just finished playing a game of basketball with a group of friends. And we were doing what I think teenage boys typically do. We were trash talking each other about who had the smooth moves, who looked like they were on the way to the league, and who just looked silly out there. And I thought we were having a wonderful time. That is, until my friend Deron said, yo, there's a D-Tech cruiser right there at the top of the street. We got to go in the building. We can't be outside. And when he said this, I was taken a little aback. You know, my thinking was, dude, y'all stink. We was out here sweating. There's no AC in the building. We're not doing anything wrong. Let's just chill. But my friends, they sided with Deron. Their thinking was, Mirko, you trying to be a tough guy. You learn your lesson. We're going to go in the building. But I was resolute. My thoughts were, if we run away, looks like we're up to no good. Nothing's going to happen. I'm going to stay here. They laughed. They chuckled. They walked up the stairs to that building. And as soon as the glass door to that brick building shut, a weird thing happened. That cruiser, it eerily sped up and stopped in the middle of the street right before I was standing. And before I knew it, four burly officers jumped out, grabbed me, and pinned me to the hood of a red Honda Civic that just happened to be parked there. And they shouted, where are the guns? Where are the drugs? I couldn't find my voice. I was kind of in shock. I couldn't even respond. I remember feeling the pressure on my back. I remember feeling the heat on the right side of my face as I was pressed on that car hood. And I just didn't understand why this was happening to me. Then I remember feeling my ankles kicked open, so I was in a wide stance. My belt buckle roughly become undone. My pants and underwear come down because they decided to do an anal cavity search right there in the middle of the street. Now, I'm assuming that they discovered quickly that I was innocent, that I was clean, that I didn't do anything wrong. Because just as quickly as the circumstance unfolded itself, it was over. My pants and underwear roughly came up. They jumped in that cruiser, shut the doors, and they were gone. No explanation as to why this had happened to me. No apology. I was just kind of left to sit and stew in the midst of my emotional energy. So that's what I did. I sat on that hot concrete mad. My friends came outside and they had all types of comments and jokes, but I couldn't say anything to them because I was feeling humiliated and also so upset at them. I couldn't believe they watched this and didn't help. Then I was even more mad at myself for being mad at them because I knew they couldn't help. And that if they had tried to get involved, it would have been even worse. So I just continued to sit on that hot concrete, frustrated, embarrassed, humiliated until I could gain the strength to stand on my feet. I couldn't even say goodbye to my friends. I just walked in silence down the street, jumped on the number 28 bus, and went home. See, for me, in those days, it felt like there was a conspiracy, that there was this narrative, this story that was constructed by other individuals who were connected to people in school, connected to those who authored those societal messages that showed up on television, and connected to some members of law enforcement, where they had this idea, this story about who they thought I was supposed to be, that they were trying to force on me. And the only way I can convey what that felt like was the author of the poem, You Ain't Nothing, that I'm going to share with you right now. You ain't nothing. Survival, it's a vicious game. Grab a tool, join the gang. Brown boy, you ain't nothing. In the hood, you'll remain consumed by the anger and pain till your blood's pouring out and on the concrete you lay slain. Brown boy, you ain't nothing. Join the team, hold heat. Make a life in these streets as a predator, super menace. Your worth is worthless. Drop out. Life ain't for you. Drop out. This world hated you before you were born. Drop out. Brown boy, you ain't nothing. You weed smoking shadow dweller, pariah of society. Be angry because we hate you. Fear us because we fear you. You'll never become anything because we don't want you to, and neither do you. Brown boy, you ain't nothing. Fast forward roughly about a year later. It's when this image that you see on the screen was taken. And I'm not sure if you can identify me because I know I look very different now, but I'm actually the individual that's in the top left-hand corner with that B hat kind of slung near my eye, trying to look tough or cool or whatever it was I was doing on that day. And this image was actually taken on a day in which I was skipping school with a bunch of friends and hanging out in an abandoned building in our neighborhood. It was one of the few spaces that we considered a safe space when we were cutting school. And by this particular point in time in my life, I felt like I had no choice but to accept that story or narrative that I feel like was constructed for me. And I often share with folks that perhaps about 30 to 35 days after this image was taken, I got a phone call that dynamically shifted the trajectory of my life. You see, I received the call that my friend Duran that I shared about in that previous anecdote about police, that he got shot and killed, murdered in front of his house over his white Nike Air Jordan sneakers. And when I heard that news, I was crushed. Not because he was the first person I knew who was a victim of street violence, because he definitely wasn't. But he was the first member of my inner circle I ever lost. You know, that group of individuals that you look forward to laughing and joking with and seeing every day and telling your deepest, darkest secrets. And he was just taken. And to add insult to injury, his dad was a lieutenant detective on the Boston police force. So amongst my circle, our thinking always was if anybody had a guaranteed pathway to success and who was always going to be safe in the community, no matter what, it's going to be Duran because of what his dad did for a living. So when I got that call that Duran, of all people, got murdered in front of his house over his sneakers of all things, while his father, that burly, decorated lieutenant detective, that 6'4" lieutenant detective of the Boston police force lay asleep in his bed, it terrified me. It made me feel in my adolescent mind like there was no way I could ever be safe when I left the household unless I was to arm myself. And that's what I actually did. I purchased a gun on the street and I carried it with me wherever I went. Now, luckily for me, not too long after I acquired that firearm, I got arrested with it in downtown Boston. And I remember that day vividly. I remember sitting in the back of that cruiser with tears welling up in the corner of my eyes, hearing in the center of my brain with crystal clear clarity the voices of every adult and educator who ever said I was going to be a statistic or a failure, that I was on the road to nowhere, that I'd end up dead or in jail one day. And I remember thinking to myself, oh my gosh, I've finally gone and done it. I have finally gone and become the person that those educators always said I was going to be. And I remember with tears streaming down my cheeks, looking at the individuals in the front and saying, please, please, please forgive me. There's been so much going on. I just need another chance. And hearing them chuckle back at me, ha ha, buddy, you blew it. And you're going away for a long, long time. Now, I'm actually going to leave you with a little bit of a cliffhanger at this moment in time, because it's not just about Mirko. I shared some elements of my tale to lift up the fact that there are circumstances that some of us experience and have to navigate that aren't a result of who we are. They're things that we just have to navigate and experience and move through. And I want you to, during this next micro moment of reflection, to take into consideration yourself, your own journey, your own identity, your own own come from place. And I'm asking you to do this because if we are truly committed to creating spaces that are safe and welcoming for others and lift up the humanity of other individuals, then as a prerequisite, first and foremost, we have to take into consideration our own. So with no shame, blame, or judgment, I want you to honor that second norm of speaking your truth. I want you to celebrate your identity, your come from place, your journey. You are not the family or circumstances that you were born into, and you should celebrate with no shame or blame or judgment, and particularly if you haven't had the opportunity to before, yourself. It's an important part of this work. We cannot create circumstances that meet the needs of others if we don't first and foremost enter into vulnerable spaces where we take into consideration our own humanity and celebrate it. And each and every single one of you has an identity, has a journey, has a come from place. Unless you're an alien or unless you're some advanced form of AI, if you're a human being like me and like your young people, you have a journey. So we're going to take 5 minutes to celebrate it. I'm going to play a song. It's going to be Born This Way by Lady Gaga. While we hear the song, speak your truths with no shame, blame, or judgment. And when the song ends, my voice comes back on and we dig even deeper.
It doesn't matter if you love him or capital H-I-M. Just put your paws up, 'cause you were born this way, baby. My mama told me when I was young, we're all born superstars. She wore my hair, put my lipstick on, in the glass of her boudoir. There's nothing wrong with loving who you are, she said, 'cause he made you perfectly. So hold your head up, girl, and you'll go far. Listen to me when I say I'm beautiful in a way that's got me so mistakes. I'm on the right track, baby, I was born this way. Don't have yourself to regret, just love yourself and accept I'm on the right track, baby, I was born this way. There ain't no other way, baby, I was born this way. Baby, I was born this way. Born this way, there ain't no other way. I'm on the right track, baby, I was born this way. Don't be a drag, just be a queen. Don't be a drag, just be a queen. Don't be a drag, just be a queen. Don't be. Give yourself prudence and love your friends. Sober kid, rejoice the truth. The religion of the insecure, I must be myself, respect my youth. A different love is not a sin, believe capital H-I-M. Hey, hey, I love my life, I love this record, and me, I'm on it, hey. I'm beautiful in my way, 'cause God makes no mistakes. I'm on the right track, baby, I was born this way. Don't have yourself to regret, just love yourself and accept I'm on the right track, baby, I was born this way. There ain't no other way, baby, I was born this way. Baby, I was born this way. Born this way, there ain't no other way. I'm on the right track, baby, I was born this way. Don't be a drag, just be a queen. Whether you're broke or evergreen, your black, white, beige, chola descent, your Lebanese, your Orient. Whether life's disabilities left you outcast with leader tease, rejoice and love yourself today, 'cause baby, you were born this way. No matter gate, red or violet, being dressed in your life, I'm on the right track, baby. I was born to survive, survive.
Thank you, Lady Gaga, for making that powerful cameo appearance. Thank you for all of you who are reflecting in whatever way works for you. I know this is not easy. Remember, one of those norms was to prepare to experience discomfort. We have to normalize speaking our truths. And if we cannot celebrate and normalize celebrating our own humanity, it's impossible to create spaces for others that acknowledge and celebrate their humanity. Now, another piece of this work, what I would actually call or consider the keys to equity, really revolves around simply being able to define what the term equity means in your circumstance. See, equity is not a term that has a universal definition. It means different things in different settings. And it's important that we're mindful of this and that we don't fall victim to sometimes sharing, with folks that we believe just because they say a certain word that they're associating the same meaning with it that we do. So it's imperative that we define terms in our context, so that we can all be on the same page and not be in the midst of circumstances where we may unintentionally think we're on the same page while we're actually in silent conflict with each other because we're associating different meaning to the words that we utilize. And the definition of equity that I embrace, it's what you see on the screen right now. It's hearing somebody's voice on what they need and providing them with that. And it's not actually authored by me. This definition comes from Dr. Christopher Emdin. And I love his definition of equity because it communicates that there's a distinction between just listening and hearing. When we hear, we're actually acknowledging the experience and the value of another individual. And as service providers, because remember, we are here for the kids. This job, this profession is not about us, but it's about the individuals that we pour into. As service providers, when we hear our young people's voices on what they need, we take action. We do our best to provide them with what that thing is that they are talking about, what that thing is that they're saying that they need. And we do this to communicate to them, to show them that we value them and that this work is truly about them, that it's work that's being done for and with them, opposed to them. And it's critical that we wrestle with this and take this into consideration. Now, as we prepare to close, there's some additional pieces of information I want to share with you. Really just as a reminder, it's imperative that we normalize going above and beyond access, to include and know who our young people are, so that we can be sure that we are not unintentionally replicating systems that are exclusionary. And truthfully, if you are not intentionally taking into consideration each and every single one of your learners as you sit to plan, whoever it is that you did not think about, you've excluded. It may be unintentional, but for them, the impact is the same. They feel like they're an afterthought. You didn't think about them. You designed this space and these experiences, not taking them into consideration. We have to normalize valuing impact over intent because the work's not about us. It's about how it shows up in the lives of those we're here for. We need to normalize ensuring that our learners see themselves reflected, in that we provide them with agency, allow them to share voice on whether or not they truly believe that our attempts to reflect them in the work are real for them. We need to ensure, again, that the work is authentically relevant for them. My favorite educational quote are the words of John Dewey from years and years ago: school's not a rehearsal for life. It's real life. It's real time in your lived experience that you're never going to get back. And it's time in the lived experience of your students that they're never going to get back either. So we can't make this pretend, fake, or cookie cutter. We need to do our due diligence and be sure that our young people understand that this education that we're trying to provide them with, it provides them with tools and skill sets that allow them to navigate the scary world outside of school. We need to universally design our practice. That means we need to invest time in planning where we reflect and actually take into consideration who our young people are, what the potential barriers are that might get in the way of them succeeding, develop multiple pathways that will ensure that they get to success. and optimize this work by providing them with voice and choice. They cannot be silent participants. Our job as educators is supposed to be to develop a sense of self-efficacy and independence within our young learners, because they're not supposed to be with us forever. We're supposed to be preparing them to join us as decision makers in this society, because that's what happens when they become 18 and 21. Their voice matters in this world just as much as yours does. And this educational journey is really supposed to be about preparing them for that. So, final micro moment of reflection I have for you today. Just a big, bold, broad question. And I want you to personalize it. What you see on the screen says, how do we? I want you to make this about you. I want you to own it in this moment. How do you design systems that remove barriers for all of your learners? And again, when we say all, we're not just talking about the ones who've been labeled as talented and gifted, not just the ones you like, not just the ones who have advocates. We're talking about all of them, including the ones who might be driving you crazy right now. We're going to hear about 2 minutes of Billie Holiday's Strange Fruit. And while this song plays, with no shame, blame, or judgment, I want you to light up that chat box. Then I will come back on and begin the process of closing us out.
Southern trees bear strange fruit, blood on the leaves and blood at the root, black bodies swinging in the southern breeze, strange fruit hanging from the poplar trees. Pastoral scene of the gallant South, the bulging eyes and the twisted mouth, scent of magnolia, sweet and fresh. Then the sudden smell of burning flesh.
I know that this journey has gone by quickly. I told you that it would. I hope that these words and that this content and that these micro moments of reflection were actually helpful and powerful for you. As we close out, I am just going to share with you a poem that is written by me that is inspired by the words of one of my favorite authors, Ta-Nehisi Coates. And this is also a poem that's been embedded in one of my hip hop songs, Good Enough. If you're interested in checking it out or the music video, you can Google it. This music video that goes along with this song, it was actually written, directed, and stars young people. It was completely their brainchild. They heard the song, reached out, young people that didn't even work at the school, that didn't even attend the school that I worked at. I am sharing this because for me, it's a representation of the fact that our young people, their voices are powerful, even young people that you don't work with on the day-to-day. So it's important that we enter into the work a certain way and do our due diligence so that we're able to get out of the way and ensure that they're able to shine. So here are my closing words. Good enough. The inequity of a privileged eye judges those such as I, no matter how reformed or how hard we try. Yet our humanity, it is not defined by their inability to accept our fragility. So the only choice is to authentically be ourselves. Leaving is not an option. And if it gets better, it'll only be through our resilience, is manifested through our willingness to stay and persevere. Every storm has an end, and the night may have come. But the sun, my friends, it will return and reappear because it always does. I hope you have a great afternoon and that you enjoy the powerful learning during this conference. See you soon. Thank you very much.